Third and long. Puts it down. She can stretch. Swift on the hip of the hustle. To the outside.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Top 25 Breakdown. Today we have number 7, Georgia, a very good SEC East team that has shown that they can try to beat Alabama in a couple years, but you know they've always been upended by Alabama, and it's really tough to play a team like that.
Even when it comes to maybe Auburn that one year when Auburn was going off on Alabama and Georgia,
Right, and then last year they stumbled a little bit against LSU. LSU just demolished them. Really, they really dominated that game.
Especially with that score, the 36-16. Yeah, a score of 36-16, it's definitely tough to go over to Death Valley and try to win over at LSU. So I really don't know what happened in that game. I don't know. I can't even remember if Jake Fromm went down or what happened. But that's an ass whooping right there.
That is a 20-point deficit. It's tough, and we saw Jake Fromm kind of struggle a little bit, especially because LSU has a very good defensive front seven, and also just secondary.
Well, just the overall great defense.
Great defense. And then they go to the conference championship, play Alabama again. Kind of a rematch from the national championship the year before. And they had the lead. They had the whole game, really. And then they kind of just they give it away with that
fake punt kind of scenario happening.
Yeah, that was
it was 2020 when that happened, and I don't know what. I don't understand the play call. I don't understand the decision making that Justin Fields had. I don't know if it was supposed to be a designed run, a pass. I saw the replay just recently. I feel like I saw the crossing route coming over, but then again the top safety was over there. I don't know what was happening, or the return man played the safety role. I really don't know what that was. It was a terrible call, an awful call.
And it costed them really the game because that Alabama got the ball at the 50-yard line.
And then that's next thing you know, Jalen Hurts running the rock. 20-yard touchdown.
Right, Jalen Hurts was phenomenal last year, especially he came in critical situations for Alabama. And when we get to Alabama, that might be an issue for them, but that's when we get to them. Georgia does return some really good pieces, like obviously most obvious is Jake Fromm, DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Zamir White, Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wilson, Ben Cleveland, J.R. Reed, Jordan Davis, and Richard LeCount.
As well as wide receiver Demetrius Robertson. Then you got DN Jermaine Johnson. Not a key returner because he was on the team last year, but he is the number 1 JUCO star from 2018. But I anticipate him being on the starting lineup at the end. But continuing on with the returning personnel, I have linebacker Nakobe Dean, as well as Tate Crowder, and cornerbacks Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes.
Yeah, Nakobe Dean being a early enrollee.
Yes. I forgot to mention that as well. Not a returning key player because he was only a
high school senior.
He was only a high school senior last year, but he is an early enrollee, and I've read a lot that he's actually been shining in the spring, as well as you imagine he should be doing very well in the summer camp
and fall camp.
Yep.
Yeah, but moving on to strength, the most obvious strength is quarterback. Quarterback play is huge, especially if you want to get to the national title again. If you look at the most common thing of these national title contenders is that they have a quarterback.
They have a great quarterback.
Great quarterback. Yep. With Georgia, they have Jake Fromm, who did really well in his first year, but now in his second year, he did phenomenal. He got his, I think it was passer completion rating to 67%, which is really good. His touchdown to interception ratio was, I think, 30-6 or something like that. He did phenomenal. He was an amazing quarterback for them.
I think credit needs to be given to the pieces that are surrounding him. Of course, Jordan is known to have a great offense. So and even last year, they're surrounded by great receivers. Yeah,
like you mentioned, he had really good pieces last year with Mecole Hardman, Riley Ridley, and Terry Godwin. Especially with Jeremiah Holloman not being gone, that's going to be a little bit of a detriment.
Right.
But we will see how that is handled.
Right.
But quarterback is obvious, a really good strength for them.
And especially that, I feel like now it's not like he had full reign. I feel like right now though Georgia can let him loose because there's nobody behind him that's contending for the spot.
Right.
So now he can make any decision he wants without having too much of a repercussion of his playing time, because now he can throw a deep ball even if it's not the best call. He can still take that chance without anybody from behind the depth chart coming and taking his spot. Because right now it's just a Jake Fromm show.
Right.
Over at Georgia. So
I mean, it's what it should be, considering he's a junior and he's like the upperclassman. He has the experience.
Moving on to another great strength that I see on this team is the running backs. I think the running backs are at Georgia are always going to look great, especially behind a great O-line, which Georgia normally has, especially with the talent they have, like DeAndre Swift, Zamir White, 2 great running backs. Zamir White has had some terrible injuries, back-to-back ACL tears, but as long as you're running back, as long as you're at Georgia, you're gonna be a phenomenal star. You're gonna have a great time. But it's all imperative that DeAndre Swift stays healthy. If DeAndre Swift does not stay healthy, he's not gonna have a great year. As long as he stays healthy and is able to, take it easy whenever he needs to, or they pull him out whenever they're destroying teams, that's fine. Let him rest, because you're gonna need him later on in the season, especially against Alabama or LSU's or whoever they may face. But as long as DeAndre Swift stays healthy, that running attack for Georgia is always gonna stay dead.
That running attack is gonna be huge. Especially because the offensive line, like moving on to the next strength, is offensive line.
Yep.
Offensive line is going to be huge. They bring back so many good pieces, and they're loaded.
Key starters.
They're loaded with talent and depth there. Finally, there's an offensive line there. Not just like from the starters to like the second team to a third team. They're that loaded at offensive line.
You got a lot of young guys and a lot of big, heavy guys that are easily can just step right in for a junior, senior, veteran, and can take over the role, and Georgia will be just fine.
Right, like we mentioned, the offensive line, the biggest piece is Andrew Thomas, who is the left tackle for this offensive line. So he's going to be a huge part of protecting Jake Fromm from obviously like the blindside blitzes and all that stuff. So I think he's going to be a huge piece for this offensive line. But the other guys are just as huge as he is, so they're going to have to all work together in sync. But when you've been playing with somebody that long, I think there's already a chemistry there.
The chemistry is there, especially they're going to give Jake Fromm all the time in the world in the pocket to throw that ball. So I think Jake Fromm, well protected, and for DeAndre Swift, they're going to open up the holes wherever he wants them. They're going to ask him, they're going to make it happen.
Right.
But finally, the last strength that I have is 4 of the 5 lead tackles of 2018 have returned for this defense, whether they are linebackers or any of the secondary players. But they're all young. They're all young last year, and you can imagine that they've all matured and they all had that 1 year of experience from them last year, that they're going to be even better.
Yeah, like you mentioned, linebackers. I think that's one of a really good strength for them, for this Georgia defense, is that they're very talented, and that's what happens when you recruit a lot of 4-stars and 5-stars, and that's what benefits your team, especially keeps that competitive edge on everybody, that your spot can be taken. But moving on to concerns, I think the biggest concern I see on the offensive side of the football is the wide receivers. It's not that they're not talented, it's just like they don't have enough experience. I think they lack experience, especially when they go up against experienced secondaries like you have Florida, you have your LSU's, probably in Alabama again, you'll see in the conference championship game. I think those defenses, those secondaries are a lot better than most secondaries in the entire country. And they only have, I think, one person coming back that has close to just about 10 receptions just the entire year.
Jesus.
From last year. So I don't say it's a huge issue, but I do see that the lack of experience will kind of show in key games.
Oh yeah, I think it'll be exploited, especially against, and might even be exploited in like the earlier games against Notre Dame, which is early in the season, get week 4. Other teams are gonna know that they have very young, inexperienced guys at the receiver position, and they're gonna try to exploit that. They're gonna try to bully them with their big, defensive, aggressive corners, especially with teams against LSU or Florida. I saw another weakness within the corners. They might take a small step back just because they lost their Jim Thorpe Award winner, DeAndre Baker, but they do have those, like I mentioned before, they do have Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell to really step in. These guys, like Eric Stokes is a redshirt sophomore with Tyson Campbell a true sophomore, and they have their stats. They've shown that they can contribute to the team, and I think they're just going to take a slight step back just because of how elite DeAndre Baker was. That I don't think they'll be able to live up to that billing, but I think they'll be just fine to replace DeAndre Baker. They'll take a slight step back, but I wouldn't say like they're going to be terrible on the secondary. They're going to be just fine.
Another concern that I saw was the pass rush. I think the pass rush needs to get better, especially because they need to help their secondary out by getting to the quarterback more often.
Right.
And I think last year they struggled a lot last year to get to the quarterback. The only one that actually got the most sacks last year was DeAndre Walker. He had 7.5.
Right.
The guy underneath him only had 2. So there's kind of a huge gap there. I mean, there's not to say that there's other players that got sacks as well, but there needs to be more guys that step up, especially to get the quarterback. They tied at 100 in sacks, which is not very good. And in team tackles for loss, they ranked 114th. It was not that great either. So they need to get more pressure on the quarterback, get more guys behind the line of scrimmage to get those running backs. They just need to do a little better penetrating the offensive line. Yep. This defense does need to get better at penetrating the offensive line, specifically because when they go up against teams that have a really good offensive line and they can't get in to get the quarterback, that quarterback's gonna have a lot of time to throw the ball. He's gonna just pick those guys apart, especially when you don't have a guy like DeAndre Baker as your corner. It's gonna be a little bit troublesome at times.
That can definitely happen, especially when you're playing, like you said, like I mentioned before, like when you're playing your Alabama Alabamas, your LSU's, your Floridas, guys that are very deep and very talented in the wide receiver position.
Yeah, but moving on to the 2019 schedule, I mean, they have really good games. Vanderbilt, Murray State, Arkansas State, and then they have a really tough game against Notre Dame. And then they have a bye at Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, another bye, Florida, Missouri, at Auburn, Texas A&M, and at Georgia Tech. This schedule is really favorable for Georgia, especially because they only have 4 away games. The Florida game is just, it's always been a neutral site game, so it's nothing new to them, but they have 4 true away games.
Right.
But looking at the schedule, what do you think the worst case scenario is for the team?
Worst case scenario, this Georgia team is still very talented, and I don't see them falling out of double-digit wins. That being said, because it's worst case scenario, if shit hits the fan for this team, I think they still go 10-2. I'm thinking they lose Notre Dame and they lose to Texas A&M, just because of how talented both those teams are, and maybe Notre Dame is just feeling themselves that day and might even get an upset, a 1-point upset, 2-point upset, a field goal upset, who knows? But it's not like Notre Dame's gonna go into Athens and stomp the hell out of Georgia. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the Notre Dame game. That Notre Dame game is gonna be very close. A lot of people think that's gonna be a blowout.
Right.
But let's be honest. Last time they played each other, it was a 1-point game. This game will probably be a 3-point game or a touchdown game.
Right.
But I do think worst case scenario for this Georgia team is a 9-3. They have tough games, especially because these teams are all getting better.
Right.
So it's not like Georgia's like they are improving, but it's not like these teams have stagnated. They are getting better as well. I think the 3 games that they would lose to would probably be a Missouri, Texas A&M, and I would probably say Auburn. I think Auburn's out there that has a very good defense and could play some trouble for Georgia. But most likely, what do you think most likely happens?
Most likely, like you mentioned before, this schedule is favored towards Georgia in all games. I'm thinking they go 12-0. I think that Georgia can really run the table, beat Notre Dame at Athens in Athens, and then beat Texas A&M even at home and handle. I think they can handle Florida. I think they can handle Auburn and go to the conference championship game and maybe lose that game.
Yeah, I think most likely I would say they're a 10-2 team. I think they're good, but I do think that they have some spots where they have a lot of players that are stepping in, especially freshmen that lack experience in big games. That could play some big issues, especially when you play a Notre Dame or a Florida or an Auburn, or if they go back to the conference championship game.
Right.
Alabama, who's been experienced, especially at getting to the conference championship game. But what do you think best case scenario is for this team?
Best case scenario, I think this team, again, my most likely scenario was 12-0. I think best case scenario, they go 12-0, they win the SEC, and they go on a playoff run at probably that's the number 1 seed with an SEC championship win. And I think I'm not saying they're gonna win the national championship. I say they get in the playoff at number 1. They might win that first round. It might lose the second. Might lose the national championship game. But either way, successful season again by Kirby Smart and crew, and just an overall great year for Georgia football again. And then probably see them back in the national championship next year.
Yeah, my best case scenario is 11-1. I think this team is very good. They're gonna beat a lot of good teams. Especially, I think that they could probably beat Notre Dame, especially because it's at home. It's a night game.
Right.
The crowd's gonna be crazy. All the atmosphere is there. It's perfect. It's a perfect game for Georgia to win. So I'm okay with Georgia winning Notre Dame. I do think that they will struggle against an Alabama because I think they'll go all the way to the conference championship with 1 loss, and I think that 1 loss will be to a Texas A&M, which is going to get a lot better. Georgia's going to get every shot from every team, so Georgia is going to get troubled with some teams that are going to send a lot of pressure, that are going to challenge those young receivers to make big plays,
right.
Especially Florida. Florida has very good secondary, and Texas A&M secondary will be better, especially if they go to the conference championship game. That conference championship game with Alabama is going to be tough just because of their experience of being at the national stage.
Right.
So thanks guys for watching this video. If you guys liked it, give us a thumbs up, subscribe because it helps us out, and comment below. Tell us what you think of Georgia.